So, hey guys, welcome to our Futurist Series, episode 3. Today we have the lovely Kerushan Govender here. Kerushan is somebody who I had the pleasure of meeting and working with. But I'm gonna do him a disservice by introducing him. I'd like you to hear from the man himself. Kerushan, will you introduce yourself to the people who are watching?
I mean, now I feel like I'm a little bit on the spot. It's always nicer when you're introduced by someone else. I have to say it's the first time that anyone's ever referred to me as the lovely Kerushan Govender. I've been called many things, but not lovely. I think that I'll take that with two hands. Just quick intro. I run a podcast myself. I'm a podcast host on Table Manners for Robots. I'm also the founder of a technology advisory company called Blacfox in Cape Town. And there's one or two things that outside of this that I do, but I'll just limit it to that.
Awesome. Yeah, the reason I describe Kerushan as lovely is because, I tell you, Kerushan and I, as I said, work together, and you have a very amazing way of distilling very complex, complicated processes and even thinking or concepts into a way that anybody can understand, and engaging and motivating. So this is really from the bottom of my heart. It was really such a pleasure to be able to work with you and also learn from you. And I'm glad that you're able to come on board and have a chat with me today.
I love you too, Shim. It's a man crush every day.
Every day. Okay, so Kerushan, we as HyperionDev are always looking for thought leaders in the space and want to get behind them as just the figure that's out there that everybody sees on the public platforms. So we want to be able to understand what it is as an individual that makes you tick, and overall to create and link the theme. How is it that tech is involved in how you work and how you also apply yourself in everything that you work in? So let's start off with a little bit of a backstory, if you don't mind. And if you could maybe briefly tell us about your story and how you'd say tech education informed your career choices.
It's a very interesting one. I'm gonna give my age away a little bit here when I say that I started off as a coder who was largely self-taught, and I definitely became a coder at a time when coding wasn't what it is today. Now coding is a thing. It's very cool to be a coder. Back then, I was the outlier. I was very much like, what are you doing? No one really understood what I was doing, and I didn't really understand what I was doing. And the proof of that was that when I got to university level, I didn't even choose computer science as something that was worth studying. I felt it was more a hobby because I always did it as a hobby and I always did it for pleasure. It was never really something that I thought could be work. And that's how I got into technology. I self-taught and I funded my way through university by actually teaching other people how to code. So in my earliest days, when I was still actually, in fact, a teenager, I was teaching other people how to code, and I made money from that, and I used the money that I made to fund my way through university to study for an actual job. So that's kind of like my earliest days of getting into the tech space. And then from there, I just used tech in everything that I did. Like even in my university, when I was completing my honors program, I had to I studied a discipline that had nothing to do with tech. It was more to do with banking and statistics and that kind of thing. And so in my honors year, I wound up writing these applications that could price derivative instruments, these exotic options, because an ordinary calculator couldn't do it. So I went and built those little apps, and I did it in a very old-fashioned way, but it was very successful. And that's how I got my big break into technology. Then from university, I got hired directly into Microsoft. Microsoft was doing its first global hiring spree, really. They didn't have a college graduate program prior to that, and then they were hiring from all parts of the world. They hired from across the world 22 young people, and I was just lucky enough to get onto that program, and that's how my journey into tech really began. It's a little bit of a segue there.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I wanna touch on the part where you mentioned that you found pleasure in coding specifically. What is it that if you could maybe dissect that for what was it that you enjoyed about it?
It's called being an ultimategeek.com. there is no there is no logical way of explaining it. It's like I was definitely not the cool kid in high school. I was definitely not the one who was doing all the cool stuff. I don't know what it was. Like my dad bought me a computer when I was fairly young, and back then we had, I don't know whether anyone would remember, but we had things like 486s and these Pentiums,
Yeah.
and that was all the rage, and we wanted the next Pentium and the next Pentium. So I was of that generation. And I don't know what it was. Like, I just wanted to strip that computer apart. I wanted to understand every part of the motherboard. I wanted to figure out how this thing understands communication. Communicating to a computer and giving it instructions was my single greatest pleasure. And I want to say, none of this is rooted in sanity. it was just, it was just the epitome of geekdom. That's all. Like, there's no other way of saying it.
Okay, and like I think you saying it's geekdom, but I think there's like a really profound curiosity for how this works, that maybe motivated you from the way that you described it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think that people who have that quality, for me, it's a case of these people, or the community that I consider myself part of, because even though I'm not a coder anymore, I
Mm.
still consider myself very much a part of that group of people who think in that way.
Yeah,
Um, I think we are the kind of people that you ask us to make a cup of tea and we'll go build you something that continues to make you tea till the day you die. Like, we're not interested in getting the job done. We're interested in building the process that continues to get the job done. And I
right.
think it was that kind of mindset that drew me to coding, because the idea of just doing something once off was such a waste of resources for me. It was like, why would you just want to do that once off when you could write an instruction that can continue to do that into perpetuity? So even to this day, that thinking can be a weakness. Like, sometimes I have a very easy task to do, and instead of just doing the task, I would want to figure out how it can be done, what are the exceptions to it getting done. and
Yeah.
and this is why the process think has always been my greatest strength and my greatest weakness, even as I moved away from coding, because it's very hard to get out of that think. You
Yeah.
always want to build processes.
Right. And then did the coding mindset influence any of your, let me put it this way, how did the coding mindset influence specific milestones in your career trajectory?
Hmm. That's a very good question. I mean, I think the coding mindset, it has influenced everything in my life and my career.
Mm.
I can't divorce the coding mindset from any aspect of my life.
Mhm.
My wife accuses me of thinking like a computer. Like, I operate in that way, and I don't want to overdo it, but there is a lot of truth in that. It's like, even when I look at the way in which I go and execute a marketing campaign, it's very methodical and structured, and it has a very specific flow line, and one thing must happen before the next. So I think that thinking has caused me to bring a lot of order and sanity and clarity into all of the things that I do. That's one very big, one positive.
Mhm.
The same thing, and I'm a believer that one's strengths can, it's two sides of the same coin. So your strength can also wind up becoming a little bit of a weakness. And
Right.
and one of the things that I run into when it comes to my process think is that I'll sometimes get hung up on a silly little thing that is 3 months from today on the flow line, and I might
Mm.
get hung up in solving that, as opposed to just getting out there and doing it.
Mhm.
So I think it can work in both ways. But to answer your question, it's influenced every part of the way I think. And today, I think the coder mindset, I think it's, if I had to just ramble off the question a little bit, it's a very powerful mindset that's very relevant in today's world,
Mhm.
because everything that we're doing is nothing more today in today's world. Very rarely do we find the true, Delhi that's just doing everything from scratch. Everything is
Mm.
very programmatic nowadays. You go into any store, you go into any experience, and it's a programmatic experience. It's pre-built, it's pre-designed, it's computer-driven. In some instances, even when it's manual, it's very much your checklist-driven culture that we live in.
Yeah.
So that skill set of being able to take a problem and break it down into instructions doesn't it's no longer limited to the realm of coding. You
Yeah.
can apply that mindset into anything, including running a business. So it's a very needed skill today.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so prevalent, and it's just the feedback that we're getting a lot from everybody that we've spoken to before. So before I dive into the next question, I'd really appreciate if you can give us some context. So for everybody that's listening, Kerushan is the CEO and founder of a company called Blackfox. Kerushan, maybe if you can just give us a brief description of what Blackfox does and what problems it solves.
Okay, good. I mean, obviously, through the few years that we've been around, we've continued to evolve a little bit. Our strategy is largely the same, but we've obviously pivoted based on all the interesting phenomena in the market. Where we're at today as a company, we focus largely on helping our clients. So we work with technology companies, and we help those clients of ours to map out their customer journey, all the way from prospect through to closed deal, through to delivered customer. And we help our clients to map out the experience of that client all the way from prospect to return customer using all possible touch points. And what we do is we help them optimize the touch points, get to know the touch points, document it, and really optimize the entire experience so that the customer journey becomes very pleasant and you're maximizing your repeat business. So we've gone from being very limited in that scope to being very consultative in terms of managing that entire end-to-end process. So that's what we do.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's a business out there that is not looking at optimizing value points within the customer journey. So I definitely think that you are contributing and solving to a real world problem, especially during the times that we're in now, where you have to value every single person that is inquiring or concerned or interested in your business. Let's take it back to tech. And I think by describing what you do and how you problem solve is great. How would you say, excuse me, how would you say how important tech is in Blackfox, and how are you using tech within your team to solve these problems?
I think that we were lucky in that our business was already quite tech optimized prior to COVID. So we were already poised to continue delivery to our clients in a very effective way. Either way, even before COVID, we were trying to push our clients to consider more digital and data types of methods or insight-driven methods. That's a better way of saying it. To get to know their market and to get to know how to service their customers. So we were pushing for that anyway. And then when COVID hit, it just caused a lot of our clients to get a little bit more pressure, or to face more pressure to investigate digital methods to reach their customers. So our business continued very much business as usual, but we had a little bit of extra environmental help, put it that way. Having said that, I think that all customers or all companies right now are like us, even though we were very tech optimized, we are all facing an additional pressure to re-look at the customer touch points that we have in any experience. So whether the customer is coming online to find out about us for the first time, whether they are maybe engaging with us on project one, or maybe they are considering using us as a return customer, no matter what experience they have with Blackfox, we now have to start thinking a little bit harder about how we can digitize those touch points to the maximum degree possible without losing the value of human intervention. So getting that balance right is exactly where I'm spending my time right this second. Even as a company, we're doing a lot of reinvention behind the scenes. A lot of our clients are not seeing everything that's going on behind the scenes in terms of what we're planning for our 2021 launch. We are definitely we are productizing ourselves very differently, and we're trying to get one thing right. And it's going to sound great theoretically, but I'm not sure how much we're going to get right in practice. What we're trying to do is we're trying to digitize our touch points as much as possible. And where the human touch point exists, we want it to depend on those qualities that only a human can bring to bear, like things like that creative flair, things like the softer skills of humanity, like kindness and making people excited and inspiring someone. So we want those human touch points to be very human centric and very almost solely human, something that a computer can't do. But the rest of the touch points have to be completely logged digitally. It has to be tracked digitally, etc., etc., etc.
Okay, that's so interesting, right? Because in many senses of the world, I think digital transformation has now become a buzzword, and I think the take that you're bringing in is that yes, it's not difficult to completely digitize your business, but I think the challenge is to digitize it in a way that it incorporates itself with human interactions in a very human-centric fashion.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to be able to spot, it's like we've got this big map, this image that we put together, and we just put words down on this map that capture the things that only a human can do, because we get so caught up in this thing like machine learning and automations and AI that we turn our attention into like, let's try to get a computer to do this thing that a human can do. And you go, but why fight that battle when we've got this one quality that a human being can bring to bear, and it's actually quite easy for the human being to bring that to bear. So let's put attention on that in the human being, and move the mundane into the world of the computer, move the repetitive into the world of the computer. That's how the split should work, because if you want your people to be inspired and motivated, you want to put the mundane into the world of the automated. So that's the thing that we're doing with this big chart, where we're just trying to get all the human only things mapped out, so that every time we have a human engagement, that person who's managing that engagement has to bring that to bear in a very big way.
Awesome. Very,
Yeah.
very, very interesting stuff. And I think just in a very crude sense of the words, you got to balance like efficiency and effectiveness, right? So while that human touch is effective, applying that logical thinking creates efficiencies. So being able to be efficient and effective by incorporating those two elements, I think it's very, very cool. Since we're speaking about transformation, and more so, let's talk about the workplace, not specifically Blackfox, but the clients that you interact with. How do you see the workplace changing, and specifically, how do you think tech education is enabling people to prepare for future scenarios?
Interesting. It's so funny because when I interview people on our podcast, Table Manners for Robots, I ask the same question and I get all sorts of answers,
Yeah.
and it's a very interesting thing. And I don't want to go too complex, but I think that it's, because I hear the answer to this so often, I might get a little bit too complex. So just bring me back down to earth if that's happening. I think that we need to move away from this dependence on, day-to-day reminders. It's like, you walk into the office, or back in the day when we actually walked into the office, you'd bump into Anne, and then you'd remember, oh my goodness, I have to send that accounts payable report, or I need to invoice my customer, so I need to walk over to Anne's desk and actually remind her, hey, has that invoice gone out? Whatever it might be, So what we need to do is we need to remember that there's a lot of the human aspects that fell away when we did a massive 2-day remote work project. So we completed a global 2-day remote work project that would typically have taken 2 years to get right from a proper project point of view, if we were going to do everything thoroughly and properly. So we did it in 2 days. Now, what are the effects of it? That we may have cracked it technologically, but we may not have cracked the people side of it. So people don't have the infrastructure around them to do the things the way they used to do it. So we need to start accounting for that. And how we do it is perhaps by maybe, instead of depending on things like Zoom meetings and depending on things like email, which is very clumsy, and so much can fall through the cracks. I think that we need to become a little bit more workflow driven. So it's like the workflow should run without a dependence on seeing people to remember things, like if you have an invoice process, and it's baked into a system, and if that system is just running and doing the next step and the next step, and it's systemized so that you log in and you do your task, and then the next step is triggered with the next person on, maybe John approves it after Anne, and that's happening on a very automated basis. It's not email driven. It is now system driven, where there's a workflow running that engine. And I think that's the part that very few people are talking about. And I think it's just because it makes this whole remote work thing seem so difficult. But I think that we haven't handled yet, or we certainly haven't handled the human aspect of productivity in the remote work context. We've set up VPNs, we've set up fancy end user computing, we've set up like these remote desktop configurations. We've done all the fancy things as enterprises, but we haven't really looked at how does Anne work with John,
And what would be your advice to CEOs who are trying to develop those systematic processes, but at the same time leverage off human interactions and connections within the workplace?
I mean, there are many people suggesting, very practical things like, on like you can never you can never discount the value of that water cooler conversation. You know, that little conversation that happened at the water cooler, you can't put a price tag on it. Yes, it seems like a waste of time in the ordinary course of duty, but maybe some idea gets triggered, or maybe you go back to your desk thinking of something or whatever. You know, there's that social element. You know, human beings, you can argue this point, but human beings tend to hunt in packs, you know, and there is that social element of the workplace that is now not present in the digital environment. So what you got to have to do is you got to like look at this problem and go beyond just maybe mandating that at the start of every Zoom meeting you spend 5 minutes just on the human side. How are you doing? You know, how are the kids? You know, like you could probably put in these more tangible things. A lot of people are also looking at gamification of the workplace now with these big leaderboards where you can track productivity in a systematic way, and you can see who's doing great and who's not doing so great and whatever. So all of these are little gimmicks that could be done along the way. But also I think it's really about bringing together this hybrid scenario of, you know, what about team gatherings that are a little bit more intentional? What about setting up days where people go into maybe a shared work environment for half a day just to be in the space of other people, or maybe, you know, beanbag sessions where you just get into a space from time to time and the team has a you know, bit of an opportunity to exchange with each other, and just have a half day with the team where it's just you know, downtime, like there's no screens involved, and you know, you put your iPad away and you put your phone away and you just interact with each other, and there are no monitors. I mean, you know, we think the Zoom world is fun, when in fact, think about it, right? Yes, you've had a whole bunch of meetings the whole day, but the reality is that you've stared at a screen the whole day. It's not like in the past where you'd sit in a meeting room and you'd have the opportunity before everyone arrived to have a quick banter with your friend, you know, and comment on this little joke or what they're wearing or whatever. You just don't have that. It's just like staring at a screen the whole day. So we need to account for the fact that screen time has to be like, you know, there has to be a day in the week or the month where people just put screens away and just interact with each other as human beings. So these are little gimmicks, but I don't think that there's one panacea. I think it's just chipping away at this problem with different tiny little solutions, you know?
Yeah. If you could maybe wait for us when looking at solving your clients' problems or even problems within Blackfox, how much of it is related to developing better human interaction touch points versus a lack of actual tech skills and tools to be able to create more efficiencies within the business?
I'm tempted to say that tech is not the problem, but then I realize we are, you know, South Africa, we are a little behind the curve, to be fair. And that's just my honest observation. I think that because you mentioned clients, I'm talking about companies out there in industry, we aren't as tech savvy as perhaps we could be at this point, given what's available to us. So South Africa, maybe there is still room for further, you know, tech adoption, and maybe really leveraging the value of tech, not just making the big bang investments, but using all the value. A lot of us have access to things like Office 365, but we haven't fully unpacked that. We haven't fully unpacked the opportunity to do some kind of team whiteboarding session using the tools that we currently have at our disposal, you know? So I think that there's still room for that. But beyond that, if I had to give direction or advice to a leader today, I would say the bulk of today's challenge sits in the domain of the human and not in the domain of the computer. I mean, we have to like really recognize that people have never experienced anything that's made them feel less like people than 2020 has caused for us. You know, we've gone through a really traumatic experience, and we need to like make room for the fact that people need to feel like people first, beyond any other tech intervention. We can workflow like crazy at the stage. We can buy new tech. We can do all sorts of new things. And you know, as a technologist at heart, I obviously advocate that. I want people to do secure networks, secure configurations, clever ways of building your end user computing plan. I love all of those topics, and I love that world. But I will still say, as priority, you have to start connecting with people first. You have to see what's going amiss in that human interaction. Are we exchanging ideas? Are we giving birth to new ideas by just two little baby or two ideas like interchanging with each other to give rise to that third idea? You know, are we doing enough of that? Are we actually like going to Sally and truly asking her, you know, what's her day like, and what you know, what is she going through at home? You know, it sounds soft and it sounds a little bit stupid, but the reality is that I don't think, in terms of this whole change, that we're discussing enough of the human element, you know?
Mm. Agreed, agreed. And I think, coming back to what you mentioned in the beginning of your answer around South Africa specifically, a little bit behind the curve. I mean, if you look at our unemployment rate, it's exceptionally high. In addition, if you look at the most in-demand jobs, besides those with managerial skill sets and those problem-solving skill sets within the domain that BlackFox sits in, a larger portion of where people or companies find gaps is within the software development um, realm. So, I mean, do you ask yourself, is it a supply problem? Is it a demand problem? I think it would be interesting to hear from you. How would one, especially as a self-taught coder, right? How would one be able to upskill themselves in this day and age in order to make themselves appropriate for companies looking to hire for tech skills and then thereafter build those human connections to improve business processes?
Interesting. I mean, the the uh, the thing with coding and the thing that the world of coding has taught us is that we don't need to be heavily institutionalized anymore. Like it was really like we've been fighting this battle theoretically about the importance of academia versus the importance of practical experience. We've been fighting this battle for decades, and then coding showed up. And I'm not sure whether you remember, but back in the day, Steve Ballmer did a rant on stage, and he just went developers, 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 and he just went on and on and on and on for God knows how long. And that video still lives on YouTube.
Mhm.
It's a wonderful thing to go check out if you haven't already. And that at that point we experienced a real breaking point in the traditional think. People said, it's not about going and getting a fancy academic qualification. It's about being able to produce code, and it's about being able to produce features, and it's about being able to produce products at the end of the day. That's what people started saying, after this whole turn that happened in the market.
Mhm.
And I think that that's what coding has shown the market today, is that you don't have to have the most exceptional CV, so to speak. You just have to have a strong GitHub library. You have to have a
Mm.
strong repository of things that you can show that you've built. That's all you need. And that's the beauty about today's world. So I think that if we had to now bring this into the South Africa context and look at, in terms of your question, like how do we get that, how do people get out there and get stuff done? Show stuff that you've built.
Mm.
I give this advice to developers all the time. Never show your CV when you're looking for a job.
Mm.
Show what you've built. And the thing with South Africans, and this is a broad generality, so ignore it if you must. South Africans tend to love doing things by feel of hand. They have a feel, they have a gut feel, it's a knack. So from a business point of view, embedding processes is not always as easy as doing it in the US, for example.
Mhm.
So when you go to a South African business leader who's built his empire from scratch, he looks at you funny and he goes, why should I go and quantify everything? Or why should I make everything so programmatic? Why do I need to bring in a business analyst who's going to document every process? I know how to run my business,
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
feeling. So the only way a young developer is going to crack that and manage to penetrate that barrier, so to speak, is if you show what you've built. So never go and find a clever way of showing off what you've built. That's my advice. Like, go study. It doesn't matter where you study as long as you're left with skills that are practical.
Mm.
And that should never be the thing that you hold up and say, look at my certificate, because that means very little. What you should be doing is showing off what you build. And if you can get that in front of as many people as possible, they're going to think, oh, it's not so hard. Because the idea of documenting every process seems so daunting. But when you show them, but I've already done it for another company similar to yours, and this is what I've done, the recruitment of that individual is so much easier.
Mhm, mhm. I'm so glad that you touch on it, because it's a shift that's needed, not only from individuals who give weighting to how they should go about getting into the job market, or how they should go about uh, entering into a career of their option, whatever that may be. There's another side to that, and that's how businesses view these individuals and how they canvas for skill sets. So, considering how things have changed and are probably going to continue to change, what would be any advice or any insights that you would share with us to business owners to equip themselves with acquiring those tech skills from individuals looking for employment?
So this is now advice for business owners who are looking to recruit developers.
Absolutely.
That's a tough one. I didn't really think about that. I would say just leave it to the people who know who know what this is about to get help. But I think that business owners do need to start skilling themselves up? And I think it's a very good question. I think honestly, it's probably a little bit of, as much as we're saying that these young developers or whoever you are, you need to go and skill yourselves up, and you need to like bring your knowledge up to speed, not in terms of getting a certification, but rather getting the practical know-how. In much the same way, I think that business owners need to start becoming conversant in technology. They need to probably do their own online courses. They probably need to go and watch YouTube videos, read articles, and become very conversant. Because in the past, it was okay to say, hey, the IT guy took care of it. And who knows, he might have been a 25-year-old IT guy that's running around doing everything, end user support and all of that. And you kind of just say, oh, if it's if it's tech related, then it's up to him.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in today's world, you have to scale up. You have to be in the know. So you can't just whiz past that tech magazine when you walk into CNA or Exclusive Books, if ever you still do. You have to go and pick up one of those things off the shelf and force yourself to get through it and just become a lot more knowledgeable. So start breaking away from this idea that, oh, that's just tech, and tech must be left to the IT person.
Right.
Become knowledgeable.
And within the Blackfox space, what are some of the learnings that you've taken into your recruitment process in order to look for and acquire great talent, tech or otherwise?
Mm-hmm. Interesting question. I mean, we've always, believe it or not, we have a very unique style. We don't look at CVs in the traditional sense. We look at capability. So we always, we have a very special recruitment system. It's an online, completely AI-driven recruitment assessment tool that we've purchased, and we run people through all of these very thorough tests, and it's all done digitally. It's all like my phone is ringing, so just bear with me. Apologies for that. So, we run people through all of these AI-driven assessments that are done online. And then eventually, if the person makes it through, it's like a game, they get scored along the way. And then they eventually get invited to an in-person interview. But that's just like an afterthought. And when I do the final in-person interview, it's more a culture fit assessment. So all the real technical assessments are done purely online. And all we do is we create these mock scenarios that are digitally re-engineered, which show the person a real life problem that they would face on the job. And we create that in Cyberland. And that's how we do it.
Okay. If you could, and I want to humanize Mr. Kerushan Govender for a bit, and I just have one or two more questions. If you had to take with you what you know now and rewind, let's go 8 months back before COVID was as prevalent as it is now, what changes would you have made?
If I had the opportunity to make the changes before COVID hit.
Correct, knowing what you know now.
Let's see. I probably would have, let me answer a little bit differently. I'll tell you what I did do. Like, for example, Table Manners for Robots. Table Manners for Robots was ready to fire towards the end of last year. We had it pipelined. It was a product that we wanted to introduce into the market. We wanted to bring to bear, a humanizing digital platform where we talked about digital things in a very human-centric way. And by the way, now that I think about it, I should sell my own products here. Founders and business leaders should watch or listen to our podcast. You can also watch it on our YouTube channel, because that's a great way of getting a basic entry point into the dialogue of technology. We humanize digital. So back to your question, we had this product ready to go towards the end of last year. We just were kind of taking time about it, planning it, getting everything figured out, and surveying whether people would like the name and blah, 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 blah. So all good things, but we were just taking our time about it. And then early this year when COVID hit, we just went into overdrive because we didn't have a choice. All of these wonderful events and things that we had planned were suddenly canceled. And now we were limited to the digital platform. So we knew we had these assets in the oven. So we just, hit accelerate in a big way. And that's how we launched a whole bunch of things in short order. So if I had to go back in time, the only thing I'd do differently is I'd probably get things done on the digital side of things a lot faster. I think that I was dragging my feet because in South Africa, we have such a luxury. We can get away with murder here. We don't have to be speedy because people are like not as digitally inclined as the rest of the world, or in a lot of places in the world. And I would just like go back and accelerate that, because COVID taught us that we can't drag our heels. When it comes to digital, we have to do it faster. We think we got time. We think we can live or survive another quarter. We can't. And that's the lesson that COVID taught us. So I would just go and do all the things that we wanted to do, but just do it according to proper timing, not dragging our feet.
Yeah, awesome, man. I just want to say that you left us with some really golden nuggets there in terms of how to think about tech, how to understand incorporating human behaviors into, I mean, not only the business environment, right, but how we interact with the world in any sense across the spectrum of human existence, right? So, I always appreciated our conversations because they always brought it back to a very, what is the purpose? What is a why? Is this going to create value?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
problems are we solving? So, I
yeah.
just want to say thank you so much for your time, Kerushan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Shim, and this was super fun. So thank you so much.
All right, guys. So please go. Business owners and individuals are looking at getting into tech alike to get a lens of what it's like as a business navigating through this post-pandemic or in the pandemic world. How businesses view tech, how we incorporate human skills into the technical process that we need to be developing. Please go check out Kerushan.com. Please check out the guys' podcasts. Very, very informative stuff. I know I'm an avid viewer every week. So yeah, Kerushan, thank you again. Have a good one, gent.
Thanks a lot, my man. I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.